Well, hello, guys. Welcome back to season two of our Path to Winter series. In our Path to Winter series, we go over the different phases of the summer and into fall, and we start going over little things that we can look forward to as it pertains to winter. And sometimes, like in this year, there's a potential as it pertains to the ESNO or ENSO is one of the two. I can't remember which one right now, but we could potentially be going into a third year of La Nina, which is usually unusual. Usually there's a huge swing between a La Nina year and then you usually will go into a neutral or you'll go into an El Nino year right after that. But the last 2 years, and potentially this could be the third year in a row, where we have a La Nina year. But what we always want to do is we like to start off with reviewing the prior winter. And this, we usually do it on a national scale, but we're going to do it for the Mid Atlantic, Northeast, and certain portions of the um, Southeast, closest to the Mid Atlantic. So, pretty much the eastern half of the nation is what we're going to focus on. We're going to be a little bit more modest this year. Um, but with that mentioned, welcome back to season two. This first episode, we're going to be going into discussing this past winter and how what we can learn from the La Nina of 2021 to 2022. So, we're this episode, what we're going to go over is what we've seen over the past winter as it pertains to it being a La Nina. Because really, last winter and then the winter before that, we've had back to back La Ninas, which is rare. And that's because usually there's a huge swing. If it's one year, some moderate, weak to moderate La Nina, the next year might be a weak to moderate El Nino. But it wasn't that way this past year. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the last winter since this might be little signs of what is to come for this upcoming winter. Now, as we go into, let's look at the maps. This is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It was colder than average in the north and warmer than average along the Sun Belt states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida was the warmest of them all. It was cooler, the coldest, some of the coldest times that they've seen in a while in areas of North Dakota and Minnesota. It was almost like it was a zonal flow just a little farther to the south than it usually is. Because there was a supply of cold this winter that hasn't been there. So I know in the Mid Atlantic and Northeast, what we dealt with was that the temperatures were their coldest in December and early January, and then they kind of evened off as you headed through the rest of the winter. So as our temperature, when you look at the temperatures throughout the nation, you can see that divide. The northern areas were below average, even if it's just a little bit. When you come around the Maryland area, the Maryland, Virginia area, this one was a little more dicey. It was closer to average than it was colder than average. So, but that's different from prior years where we've had just warm or relatively mild winters. So, with that said, with that said, let's look at our precipitation for this past winter. Amount of rain, snow, sleet, whatever that happened this winter. As you can see, there's all this brown that's on the map. It was much drier than average, especially in the central sections of the United States of America. And then you look off to the western parts, just right along the coast, around of Washington State, Oregon, and Northern California, you saw wetter than average conditions here. And then a little pond of wetter than average conditions in Kentucky and Tennessee. And I don't know if all of us remember, but there was some flooding in Kentucky and Tennessee this past winter, with a big rainstorm that came through. Areas of the South were a little wetter than average, including Mississippi and Alabama, and Georgia. Uh, when you go up to the Northeast, there's a little pocket of slightly wetter than average conditions, and they got hit with a really big nor'easter, late January and early February, and that might have skewed those numbers a little bit. But for the most part, throughout the lower 48 states, it was a drier than average winter, um, for this La Nina year. And then you consider, and that makes sense when you consider a typical La Nina, that two jet streams are usually apart from each other. So you'll have the southern jet with the moisture, the northern jet with the cold air, and you really want interaction between those two to get the big wet rain or snow producing systems. Otherwise, you get these fast moving storm systems. They move across, they drop a little bit, if anything at all, and move on their way. So it was a drier year, winter than average for the lower 48. Now, historical, we're going to look at some history here, because the 2009-2010 winter was a special one for me. It was like the most snow I think I've ever seen in a set period of time, in the Washington, Baltimore region, in the Mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast. We broke a ton of records. Now, as we bring that out, we also want to state that right behind that, you had a pretty strong La Nina that backed up that moderate to strong El Nino in that year, and that went through that winter. And then we had another year right behind that where we had another La Nina. So you see, it happens from time to time. We had one in the last decade or so, but the even though you see some of these negative numbers in 2013 and 2014, that's more so neutral. That's neutral, as it pertains to things like that. 2015 into 2016, we ended up having a El Nino year, and the El Nino year actually started in weak El Nino in 2015, 14 and 15. Then 2015 and 16 was a moderate to strong El Nino. And then, of course, you see that backed up with a La Nina and neutral, then another La Nina. Then we had a weak El Nino from 2018 into 2019. Then we went into neutral, but then look at this through 2020 and 2021. You could consider this a weak to moderate La Nina for the 2020 and 2021 seasons. And then you can go back into the 2021 and 2022 seasons, and you can see practically almost similar numbers. It was a little weaker than the prior year, during December, January, November, December, January, but it was still around the same ballpark as it pertains to La Ninas. And you can see where we are now. February, March, April. The March, April, Mays haven't come out yet because, of course, we're still in May. So we'll probably get that sometime in early to mid-June. But one thing that we want to take from this is that we can see it doesn't appear. What you notice, for example, with the El Ninos, look at 2015, for example. Look at, as you went through November, December, January, 2.6, December, January, February, 2.5, January, February, March, 2.1, February, March, April, 1.6, March, April, May, 0.9. So you see a gradual decline in the ocean temp. That's where the El Niños, where the Pacific Ocean temps are above normal. The La Niñas are when they're below normal in this Pacific Ocean. So when you look at that, you can see a gradual decline, and you see the same thing with the La Niñas over these years. You have that gradual decline over time, and then it goes off, and then it'll go to El Nino or neutral, whatever. But here you're seeing it kind of staying steady. Usually by February, March, April, you're seeing that decline. May, June, March, April, May, June, you're seeing that decline. So right now, we're not really seeing much of a decline. We're kind of seeing a little bit, feels like more of a continuation of what we dealt with in the past winter. And that's interesting to say, especially for us snow lovers. Let's look at the snowfall for the prior year. In the northern half of the United States, this kind of tells the divide with the temperatures that we talked about. The northern half of the United States didn't have as much. You could consider this in this area right here, in Nevada and Iowa. That could be lower than average snowfall considering the temperatures that we dealt with during that period of time. Only about a little over a foot of snow for a total winter, but they had the cold. It just was no precipitation there, and that's where that precipitation map came in, where it was just drier than average up in the central plains. But when you look around the D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, Pennsylvania area, you have more snow than the prior year, and you can almost kind of tell where that warmer than average, that average temperature and slightly colder than average was. And this is from that blizzard that I told you happen in late January over here in Connecticut around Boston. And early January and February. So snowfall. This excuse me. This is what our snowfall map, as it pertains for last year. This is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This is the snowfall amount so far through for last winter, accumulation wise. So if we repeated winters, no two winters are the same, but there's certain things that we can learn from that pattern. We can look at that pattern and say if everything were the same, maybe this is what we get. This is our end result, and that's where the La Nina currently appears to be trending. That it's just going to be staying the course as it pertains to that. But it's really early. We have months to figure that type of stuff out. But we're just reviewing last winter. Now, here's what the model predictions. This is the last one we're going to go over today. And then we're going to touch on this a little bit more next week and what a La Nina actually means. We're going to go into that in our next episode. This is the model projections. Anything under negative 0.5 is a La Nina. Anything under that to 0 and up to positive 0.5, this is in temperature. Anything in that area or in that range is a neutral condition. Anything 0.5 degrees and up is considered El Nino. Okay? So the models currently, this thing is actually slightly incorrect. CFSV2 points out that this is a little bit below -1 right now, but we'll say that it's in the right ballpark. It's saying that over time that this is going to even out to be about a weak La Nina throughout the winter. One thing that I will tell you from watching these models, especially this time of year, they often underdo how warm or how cold the Pacific will be. So there have been times when it's looked like we were going to go into an El Nino during this time of year, and I've told people just hold on. There's something to this one. That there's something with these models that they run a little warmer than they actually end up being. So I would anticipate personally, if it does trend a little bit warmer, we'll have to watch over the next few months and see if that actually happens. But for right now, I'll say my projection would be, and this is an early projection for me, that we will be in the same type of La Nina that we did last year. Now, no two La Ninas are the same, but temperature-wise, as the Pacific Ocean, I believe that that'll be about the same. So thank you for going over our last winter with us. This past winter, and at least in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, there's a lot of interesting things that we can learn from last winter. And next time we're going to go out into that, talk more about our projection of the La Nina that we expect to come up this upcoming 2022-2023 winter season and what that means when we say that. Okay, so you all enjoy the weather and have a wonderful rest of your week.